Hello everyone. So in this lecture we are going to talk about the general issues of cloud migration, means how the companies can migrate their infrastructures, their business onto the cloud. And also we are going to talk about the entire procurement process, that how the company procure the cloud services and then move their business onto the cloud. So during the process, they need to go for request for proposal. That is a very important activity. It is known as RFP. So we'll understand what exactly is RFP and how the entire RFP process has been done to make this entire migration efficient and meaningful to the organization. Let's start. So if the company is fully established and having its own infrastructures and the on-premise, means they are having their on-premise data centers, and because of this competitive environment they want to move to the cloud. So there are certain issues are there which are always very uh, relevant for any company. They need to search what are the available cloud services or the providers in their region, or as a whole, who is the best service providers. So first they have to identify the availability of these providers, and then they have to think that does the cloud providers meet the specification of the existence technical environment which the company is dealing with. The other point of concern is, will the cloud services are able to handle the specification of the existing technical environment, as well as are they able to cope up with the expected growth of the company. Then the other question, which is also a primary concern while doing a migration, is how will the cloud provider ensure that there is no organizational impact during the migration process. The other issues may be uh, what kind of validation plan or the test plan that the cloud providers offers to the organization to ensure that there will be no issues after the migration, means how they can ensure to the customer that on moving to the cloud everything will be taken care and it will not affect the business. What are the strategies that the cloud providers uses to handle the issues during and after the migration? So what kind of help desk, what kind of assurance has been given by the cloud providers? So these are some issues which have to be thoroughly understood and analyzed before the company can decide to move their business onto the cloud. Before this activity, the company must have also realized the benefit, that does it really benefit in terms of financial aspect when they move to the cloud. So this they can do with the help of many available calculators that are available by the cloud providers. Like we have a cost calculators there that can help any organization to identify the kind of expenses or the upfront that is required to move onto the cloud. Then there is also called total cost of ownership calculator is also available, that will also give a very detailed picture about the expenses and the benefits that a company can get. Apart from this financial benefit, the company has to deal with many other issues, like what are the aspects of security, what are the compliances issues. So these are also the primary concern that the company needs to ensure that after moving to the cloud, that these cannot be affected. So other apart from getting the financial advantage, the other important requirements or the concern for any company is legal and regulatory requirements. So uh, one of the important concern is the privacy issues. So now these privacy regulations are not consistent worldwide, and therefore there is always a risk of liability. And if an organization is planning to shift to the cloud, and if the cloud provider does not comply with the privacy regulation, then it's a big risk for any organization. We must be knowing that the European Union, that is EU, has very strict privacy protections, and there's a very formal guidelines that is defined in terms of GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, which actually deals with caring of all these privacy issues. And the failure to these issues means if the providers are actually fail to comply with these issues, then it can result in substantial financial penalties or a kind of sanction. So before moving to any of the cloud providers, we need to ensure that are they fulfilling the GDPR guidelines or not. Though it's a kind of a binding from the cloud provider also that they have to fulfill all these requirements, otherwise they may be sanctioned of providing these services. But as an organization who is planning to move to the cloud, they also need to check beforehand what are the offerings and what are the compliances that the cloud is actually fulfilling. So if we look onto the aspect or the guidelines provided by the EU, there are basically two primary issues are there, which basically covered by the GDPR, that basically how the loss of control over the data can be taken care, and what is the dependence on an external cloud provider. Then we have other important issues like compliances. So privacy is one of the important issues that to be taken care or to be think of, and then there's the compliance issues. So if you think about the cloud environment, there are compliances issues that are maybe not present in the traditional on-premise IT environment. So a cloud provider may need to meet the same regulatory policies and procedures that must comply with the business that you are dealing with. So you have to make sure as an organization that your contract with the providers outlines how the provider will achieve the compliances and will enforcing all these compliances. And also you have to check the terms and condition, that if it is not going to fulfill the compliances, then what are the penalties are actually there mentioned if these compliances are not fulfilled or not maintained. So as an organization, it's a responsibility to make sure all the cross check about all these issues, because you are also bound to go against this penalty if your business is not fulfilling with the required compliances set by the government or any regulatory body. So here one thing to understand, that the cloud provider is also a kind of one entity which is responsible for ensuring all these compliances which is required for the specific industry. But at the same time, you are running your business, so you have to also ensure that the compliances will be maintained. So when I say compliances, these are some regulatory conditions which are applicable based on the different industries. Like for the companies who are dealing with the finance, they have the different kind of regulatory things are there. Those who are dealing with the healthcare, those who are dealing for the real estate, those who are dealing for manufacturing. So all these industries have to undergo certain regulatories just to make all the business requirements secure and smooth. So the company has to ensure these kind of compliances. So the organization has to ensure that how does this multi-tenancies in a cloud environment affect the security and compliances requirement, because we know that the cloud is basically provides us a multi-tenant service, tenancy service. That means the resources are shared to different kind of clients. So does this violate any kind of compliancy features? That also you have to ensure as an organization. You need to also make sure about the usage of your data that you are keeping onto the cloud. So you need to also aware that where is the cloud provider's data center located. You actually need to know where your data is, because you need to have comply with the regulation. Because if your data is sitting or existing in the European region, then you have to comply with the regulations which is defined for that region, because every region may have different rules and regulations. So you have to ensure that what is the region where your data is being kept. So the best practices that the company follows to run a smooth and secure business, they actually follow certain best practices which is defined. So if we talk in context of cloud computing, then best practices include that one need to fully access the need of the business by actually engaging with the stakeholders early in this process. So to uh, to fulfill this requirement or to follow this practice, there is a need to perform the need analysis. The company need to analyze the current IT processes. They need to seek buy-in from the management. So certain activities are required to undergo and opt this best practices in the business. Then the organization which is planning to migrate to the cloud, they need to identify the cloud solutions that offers mature and evolving self-service management solutions. uh, the provider which can provide on demand and a quick elasticity as and when needed. The provider must also have some extensive reporting capabilities, as well as the provider must provide end-to-end automated management solutions. So these are the things which is actually used or considered as a best practice for any business. Then also the compliance program means the company has to undergo a compliance program where it is required that the organization must make sure that all the means the employees, all the persons who are engaged in dealing with the business, they need to aware about the regulatory requirement. So they need to conduct the compliance training time to time, so to make their employees aware about the compliance requirement. The company must also designate you can say a compliance officer, which is having a responsibility for all the compliance matters. uh, they need to this officer must have an eye on the undergoing compliances for the business which is actually the company dealing with, and need to create and update the policies and procedures, and must audit the report on the policy compliances from time to time. Then the other thing that we think as a best practice for any industry is to access the performance of a system of the existing platform. This basically requires the industry can perform the user acceptance testing, that what are the requirements from the user side. They need to perform regular monitoring to quickly identify the potential issues. The company must make regular adjustment to the systems based on the growth. So these are the very fundamental things which is assumed as a best practice for any company to run their business. So as I said that every industry which are actually dealing or existing, they need to follow certain standards, they need to follow some best practice. So many industries actually they have a compliance requirements, and if they are not meeting this requirement, then they lead to undergo a kind of penalty, a kind of monetary fines. some kind of criminal prosecutions, or maybe sanctions. So this is a list of different industries. So this is just a small information about some industries. All the industries are not being covered, but just to get an idea that what are the industries and what are the compliances given for these industries and who are the governing bodies. So the very first is the payment card industry. So payment card industry means the industry which allows the online payment using this credit and debit card. So here we have PCI security standards are actually being they're set as a regulatory requirement, or the compliance requirement means all the companies who are dealing with, for example, all the companies who deals with the online transaction or online payment, then they need to undergo this PCI security standards. This actually ensures that whatever the information you are taking from the customer to take the payment or do financial transaction, then this information must be kept a secret and not be shared with any other kind of person. So for this, there is a PCI Security Standard Council is there, which is actually the governing body who look after this kind of compliance. Then we have HIPAA, that is basically for the healthcare, and the governing body is US Department of Health and Human Services. Similarly, we have for financial, and for financial we have different compliance requirements are there, which is actually applicable based on the region where you are working. So here the example is one is SOX is very important compliances in the financial, which is governed by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Similarly, for elections also we have Federal Election Campaigning Act is there, one compliance is there, which is governed by the Federal Election Commission. So these are some standards or the compliances requirement for different industries in the different sectors. So if you are a company, if you are an organization, then you need to check that which kind of business you are doing, in which industry you are involved with, and what kind of compliances are applicable to you. And you need to make sure that this compliances must be provided or taken care by the provider to whom you are migrating. So this is all in this lecture. So I hope you have understood what exactly is what are the issues of migration. So this is all for this lecture. Thank you very much.